walked through the grand halls of the Confederation Station, her footsteps echoing off walls made from materials she still couldn't identify after 20 years. The station was older than human civilization, built by species that had been traveling the stars when humanity was still learning to make fire. She loved this place. The colors that shifted with the light, the gentle hum of alien technology, the way beings from dozens of worlds moved together in peaceful cooperation. This was everything humanity had dreamed of when they first looked up at the stars. 50 years ago, when the great ships had appeared in Earth's sky, panic had gripped the world. But the visitors came in peace. They called themselves the Galactic Confederation, and they invited humanity to join a community of nearly 900 species spread across the galaxy. The invitation came with conditions. Humanity would start as a junior member, with limited voting rights and restricted access to advanced technologies, but they could earn full membership by proving they were peaceful and stable. Most humans thought it was a fair deal. Had been there from the beginning. As a young diplomat, she had helped write the first trade agreements. She had watched human colonies spread to new worlds with Confederation approval. She had seen human doctors save alien lives and human farmers feed hungry populations across the galaxy. Now she served as humanity's primary representative to the Outer Council, where newer species were allowed to participate in Confederation business. It wasn't the Inner Council where the real decisions were made, but it was a start. The Inner Council was controlled by the High Council of 12, the most advanced species in the galaxy. They had mastered time itself, living for millions of years and thinking in geological ages. The collective shared a single mind across billions of bodies. The Eternal Dynasty had ruled their empire for longer than most stars had existed. Respected these ancient beings, but sometimes she worried they didn't understand humanity very well. She entered her office and found her assistant, waiting with a worried expression. Was young for a diplomat, only 35, but he had a talent for reading between the lines of alien politics. "What's wrong?" asked. Handed her a data pad. "The quarterly reports are in. Take a look at the trade restrictions." Scanned the numbers and felt her stomach drop. Over the past year, 17 different trade agreements had been quietly modified. Restrictions had been placed on human agricultural exports. Limits had been set on the number of human ships allowed in certain systems. Small changes, but they added up. "And there's more," continued. "The Science Exchange Program. They're not accepting any more human applicants. The Cultural Initiative has dropped all human colonies from their list, and 3 different species have filed complaints about human aggressive expansion." Frowned. "Aggressive expansion. We've established 12 agricultural colonies in empty systems. We asked for permission each time." "I know, but apparently some species think 12 colonies in 50 years is too fast." Sat down heavily. She had noticed the changing attitudes over the past few years. Conversations that used to be friendly had become formal. Invitations to social events had stopped coming. When she spoke at Outer Council meetings, fewer beings listened. At first, she had thought it was just natural caution. Humans were different from most species in the Confederation. They adapted quickly to new environments. They learned alien technologies and often improved them. Their population grew faster than species that lived for thousands of years. But she was starting to realize it was more than caution. It was fear. "There's something else," said quietly. "I've been talking to contacts in the delegation. They're worried about humanity too, but for different reasons." "What do you mean?" "They think something is being planned. Military movements near human space. The kind of movements that happen before a peacekeeping intervention." Felt cold. Peacekeeping interventions were what the Confederation called it when they decided a species had become too dangerous. It had happened before to species that grew too fast or developed technologies the Council considered threatening. Those species usually disappeared from the records entirely. "That's impossible," she said. "Humanity has never broken a single Confederation law. We've never attacked anyone. We've helped more species than we've competed with." "I know, but think about it from their perspective. 50 years ago, humans were limited to one world. Now we're on over 100. 50 years ago, we barely understood faster-than-light travel. Now human ships are among the fastest in the galaxy. 50 years ago, we had one government. Now we have a unified species with colonies spanning 1,000 light years." Understood what he was saying, but it made her angry. "So we're being punished for being successful. We're being feared for being successful. There's a difference." That evening, stood on the observation deck of her quarters, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 23 billion humans were living their lives, working, raising families, exploring new worlds. They trusted that the Confederation would protect them, that the ancient wisdom of the Council species would guide them safely into the future. She thought about her own, growing up on New Terra with alien friends, learning languages that existed before Earth had a moon. They had never known a universe where humans were alone. Her communication console chimed. An encrypted message from Earth's intelligence services. Opened it with growing dread. The message was simple: satellite imagery showing massive fleet movements. Ships from dozens of Council species gathering at staging areas around human space. No hostile actions yet, but the buildup was unmistakable. Someone was preparing for war against humanity. Stared at the star charts attached to the message. Red dots showed Council fleets in positions that could cut off human trade routes. Green dots showed human colonies that would be isolated if those fleets moved forward. Blue dots showed Earth and the other core human worlds, suddenly looking very small and vulnerable. The Confederation had spent 50 years teaching humanity about peace, cooperation, and the rule of law. They had taught humans to trust in diplomacy and the wisdom of ancient civilizations. Now wondered if those lessons had been preparing humanity for slaughter. She composed a message to Earth's government, her hands shaking slightly as she typed. The message was brief. Request immediate security review. Situation may be deteriorating rapidly. Recommend preparation of contingency plans. As she sent the message, looked back out at the stars. Tomorrow she would attend another council meeting, smile at ancient beings who might be planning humanity's destruction, and continue playing the game of diplomacy. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel afraid. The summons came 3 weeks later, had never seen anything like it in 50 years of diplomatic service. The message was transmitted directly to every human government simultaneously, bypassing normal diplomatic channels entirely. Ambassador will appear before the High Council of 12 in the Grand Chamber of Judgment within 72 hours. This appearance is mandatory and non-negotiable. Hands trembled as she read the message. The Grand Chamber of Judgment was not a place for normal diplomatic meetings. It was where the Council delivered verdicts to species that had violated Confederation law. Some species never left that chamber. The journey to the Confederation capital took 2 days through hyperspace, traveled alone as required by the summons. Her ship was escorted by Council vessels the moment she entered capital system space. The escorts didn't respond to her communications. The capital was a moon-sized space station that orbited close to the galaxy's central black hole. It was the oldest artificial structure in known space, built by civilizations that had vanished before most current species had evolved. Had visited it many times for ceremonies and celebrations, but never like this. Council security forces met her ship at the docking bay. They were polite but firm as they guided her through corridors she had never seen before. These passages were older than the public areas, carved from materials that seemed to absorb light. The grand chamber was vast, with walls that curved up into darkness. 12 massive thrones were arranged in a circle, each designed for a different form of life. Some held beings recognized. Others contained entities so alien she couldn't even identify their basic structure. At the center of the circle stood a single chair, obviously meant for her. Walked to the chair on unsteady legs. She had faced difficult negotiations before, but this felt different. This felt like a trial where the verdict had already been decided. Council Speaker Thane VII materialized in the largest throne. There was a crystalline being that existed partially outside normal time. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Human representative," Thane VII intoned. "You appear before this council to receive judgment on the species known as humanity." "I request clarification," said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Humanity is not aware of any charges against it." "Ignorance is not a defense," replied Prime, the collective consciousness speaking through thousands of voices in perfect unison. "Your species has been evaluated according to Confederation standards. The evaluation is complete." A holographic display materialized in the air above. It showed human expansion across the galaxy over the past 50 years. Colonies appeared like spreading infection on the galactic map. Population growth charts climbed at angles that looked threatening when displayed this way. "Observe," said an entity didn't recognize, something that looked like flowing mercury with too many eyes. "Standard population expansion rate for stable species, 0.3% annually. Human expansion rate, 4.7% annually. This rate indicates aggressive territorial ambitions." "Those are agricultural colonies," protested. "We're growing food to help feed other species." "Observe," continued the Mercury being. "Standard technological development timeline for junior species, 500 years to achieve council-level capabilities. Human timeline, projected 50 years. This indicates dangerous instability." Felt anger rising in her chest. "We've shared every technological advance freely with the Confederation. We've never weaponized anything we've learned." "Observe," said Thane VII. "Military analysis of human tactical doctrine. No other species in Confederation history has demonstrated such rapid adaptation to combat situations. Humans modify their strategies faster than our computers can analyze them." "We've never attacked anyone," said. "Your species has been classified as a Tier 7 expansion risk," announced Eternal Dynasty Crown Bearer of the Infinite Train, a title that took several seconds to pronounce. The being itself was hidden in robes that seemed to contain entire star systems. "This classification is reserved for existential threats to galactic stability." Blood ran cold. She knew about Tier 7 classifications from her diplomatic training. Only 3 species in galactic history had ever received that designation. None of them existed anymore. "The Council has determined that immediate corrective action is required," Thane VII continued. "The following restrictions will be implemented within 6 months. The demands appeared in the air, written in glowing text that hurt to look at. First, human population will be limited to 50 million individuals per system. Excess population will be relocated to designated worlds. Calculated quickly, that would mean forcibly moving over half of humanity. Second, all human technological research will be conducted under Council supervision. No independent development of any kind will be permitted. That would end human scientific progress entirely. Third, all human military vessels and defensive installations will be surrendered to Council authority. That would leave humanity defenseless. Fourth, Council guidance facilitators will be installed in every human government to ensure compliance with these restrictions. That would end human independence. Fifth, human expansion beyond currently occupied systems is permanently prohibited. That would trap humanity in a slowly shrinking cage. Stood up slowly, her mind racing. Around her, the 12 ancient beings waited for her response. Some seemed bored, as if this was routine business. Others watched her with what might have been curiosity. "May I ask," she said carefully, "what happens if humanity doesn't comply with these suggestions?" "They are not suggestions," Prime responded. "They are requirements. Non-compliance will result in corrective measures." "What kind of corrective measures?" "The kind that ensure compliance," said the Mercury being. "Understood. Military action. The kind that had erased the 3 previous Tier 7 species from existence." She thought about her on New Terra. She thought about human families across hundreds of worlds, working, building, dreaming of a future among the stars. She thought about everything humanity had achieved in 50 years of peaceful cooperation. "I need to consult with my government," she said finally. "You have 6 months," Thane VII announced. "Use them wisely." As left the chamber, escorted again by silent guards, she felt the weight of 23 billion lives on her shoulders. The ancient beings behind her had just declared war on humanity, but they had dressed it up as law and called it justice. The journey back to human space felt like the longest trip of her life. Composed and deleted a dozen messages to Earth's government. How do you tell your entire species that the galactic community they had trusted for 50 years had just sentenced them to slow extinction? Finally, she settled on a simple message. Council has delivered ultimatum. Request immediate emergency session of all colonial governments. Situation critical. As her ship jumped back into human space, saw something that made her heart sink. Council ships were already moving into position around human systems, not attacking yet but making their presence known. The message was clear. This was not a negotiation. Looked out at the stars that humanity had hoped to share peacefully with their alien neighbors. Now those same stars might become a battlefield. But as she watched human patrol ships moving to intercept the Council vessels, felt something unexpected. Not just fear, but anger. And beneath the anger, something harder and more determined. The Council had made a mistake. They had spent 50 years teaching humanity about peace and cooperation, but they had forgotten to ask what humans were like when peace failed. Composed one final message, this time to her counterparts in other species governments. Humanity thanks the Galactic Confederation for 50 years of friendship and cooperation. We regret that the Council has chosen to end that friendship. We hope that future generations might find a way back to peace. It was a diplomatic way of saying goodbye. Because was beginning to suspect that the next message the galaxy received from humanity would not be diplomatic at all. The emergency session began 12 hours after return to Earth. Every human colony, every government, every military commander was connected through quantum communication links that spanned thousands of light years. In 50 years of human expansion, nothing like this had ever been needed. President Wei Ming opened the session from Earth's capital. Around him sat the leaders of humanity's most important worlds. On screens throughout the chamber, governors and representatives from distant colonies watched with grim faces. Presented the Council's ultimatum without adding her own opinions. The numbers spoke for themselves. Forced relocation of 15 billion people, the end of independent research, surrender of all defenses, permanent Council oversight of human governments. The debate that followed was unlike anything in human political history. Some voices called for immediate compliance. "We can't fight the entire galaxy," argued Governor Martinez from Alpha. "These beings have technology we can't imagine. They've been traveling space since before humans existed. We have to be practical." "Practical means survival," agreed Representative from New Australia. "We can rebuild. We can grow again under their rules, but we can't do anything if we're extinct." But other voices demanded resistance. "They're asking us to volunteer for slavery," General Harrison said from humanity's military headquarters on Titan. 50 million per system means breaking up families. Council oversight means the end of human democracy. This isn't survival. This is slow death. Look at the pattern, added Dr. Sarah's niece and one of humanity's leading. Every species that accepted restrictions like these eventually disappeared. The Council doesn't want to control us. They want to eliminate us gradually so other species don't get nervous. The debate raged for 3 days. Watch tired faces on screens as humanity's leaders struggled with an impossible choice. Accept the Council's terms and lose everything that made humanity human. Reject the terms and face military action from forces they couldn't hope to defeat. On the 3rd day, President called for a final vote. But before the voting began, he stood to address the assembly. 50 years ago, we reached for the stars with hope in our hearts, he said. We wanted to join a community of peaceful species, to learn from beings older and wiser than ourselves. We offered our friendship, our knowledge, our help to any who needed it. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that had grown older during 3 days of debate. We came to the galaxy in peace. We sought friends among the stars. We offered our hands in cooperation and our minds in service to the greater good. We have kept every promise we made. We have broken no laws. We have threatened no one. His voice grew stronger. But we will not surrender our children's future to ancient bullies who mistake fear for wisdom. We will not abandon the principles that brought us to the stars. And we will not let beings who think in geological time decide that human growth is too fast for their comfort. The vote was closer than had expected, but the result was clear. Humanity would reject the Council's ultimatum. The formal response was delivered through, transmitted simultaneously to every Council member and broadcast across the galaxy so that all species could hear it. Humanity respectfully declines the Council's suggestion and requests immediate withdrawal of military forces from our space. The response was polite, diplomatic, and completely defiant. Knew that the galaxy was watching. Most species probably expected humanity to collapse within days once the Council ships began their attack. The humans were young, inexperienced, and vastly outnumbered, but had been watching something the Council apparently had missed. In the 3 days of debate, while politicians argued and generals planned, something else had been happening. Human ships were disappearing. Not destroyed, not captured, just gone. Merchant vessels that should have been carrying trade goods between colonies simply vanished from tracking systems. Passenger ships that should have been transporting civilians changed course without explanation. Even the great colony ships that carried entire cities between worlds went dark and disappeared into deep space. At the same time, industrial production across human space had shifted overnight. Factories that had been making farming equipment were suddenly producing things couldn't identify from the shipping manifests. Research stations that had been studying alien plant growth were now working on projects with classified names. General Harrison briefed the political leadership about humanity's defensive preparations, but noticed what he wasn't saying as much as what he was. Defense satellites around key worlds were being powered down and moved. Military bases that should have been preparing for siege warfare were being emptied instead. "Where are our ships going?" asked Harrison privately after one briefing. The general smiled grimly. "Places the Council doesn't know about, doing things the Council doesn't expect." "What kind of things?" "The kind of things that might even the odds a little." Was starting to understand that humanity's response to the Council's ultimatum was more complex than simple defiance. But she didn't fully grasp the scope of what was happening until brought her the intelligence reports. "Look at this," he said, spreading star charts across her desk. "Council battle fleets are moving into position around human space, but they're moving like they did against the Hegemony War 300 years ago. Same formations, same approach patterns, same tactical doctrines." Study the charts, So the Council has been fighting the same way for thousands of years. They're incredibly advanced, but they don't adapt. Their tactics work because they have overwhelming technology and numbers, but they've never fought an opponent that changes tactics faster than they can analyze them. And humans do that. Humans do that better than any species in galactic history. Remember, we evolved as hunters on a world full of dangerous predators. We learned to adapt or die. The Council species evolved on peaceful worlds where thinking slowly and carefully was rewarded. Began to see the outlines of humanity's strategy. They weren't going to fight a traditional defensive war. They weren't going to stand still and let superior Council technology grind them down. They were going to do something the ancient species would never expect. They were going to hunt. The Council fleets arrived at the edge of human space exactly on schedule, just as their tactical computers had predicted. They found empty space where human defensive fleets should have been waiting. Transmitted humanity's final diplomatic message from her ship as it departed the last human outpost in Council-monitored space. To the High Council of 12 and all member species of the Galactic Confederation, for 50 years, humanity has served as faithful members of this community. We have shared our knowledge, offered our friendship, and kept our word in all things. The message continued as Council ships began moving toward defenseless human colonies. You asked to see what humans are truly capable of when we are not bound by Confederation law. You demanded to know what happens when humanity stops holding back our aggressive nature. You wanted to test whether a young species can challenge ancient wisdom. Paused as she watched the lead Council ships enter human space, moving confidently toward what they expected to be an easy victory. You are about to find out. As the message ended, human ships began appearing throughout Council space. Not where anyone expected them, not in the patterns any computer had predicted, but everywhere at once. The hunt had begun. Admiral of the Eternal Dynasty had been commanding fleets for longer than human civilization had existed. In 3,000 years of service, he had never lost a battle. His tactical computers contained the combined military wisdom of a dozen species, refined over millions of years of warfare. Those computers had predicted that the human resistance would last exactly 47 hours. The humans had been fighting for 6 weeks and was starting to think his computers might be broken. The first sign of trouble came when his fleet arrived at New Terra, humanity's largest agricultural colony. His scouts had reported a population of 12 million humans defending the planet with outdated weapons and primitive tactics. His battle plan called for a simple orbital bombardment followed by ground occupation. Instead, his fleet found an empty world. Not destroyed, not devastated, just empty. The cities were intact but deserted. The farms were still growing crops, but there was no one to harvest them. Even the orbital defense platforms had been powered down and abandoned. His computers spent 6 hours analyzing the situation before concluding that the humans had simply run away. It was logical but disappointing. The Admiral had hoped for at least some resistance to test his new weapon systems. Then the attacks began. The first target was Supply Depot Gamma, a massive station that fed fuel and ammunition to the Council fleets. It was protected by shields that could stop a supernova and weapons that could destroy planets. It was also located in the center of Council space, hundreds of light years from the nearest human colony. The attackers appeared without warning, 3 small human ships that materialized inside the station's defensive perimeter. They ignored the shields entirely, flew directly through the station's docking bays, and detonated powerful explosives that turned the entire complex into expanding gas and debris. The human ships escaped before the station's defenders could even target them. Admiral studied the attack reports with growing confusion. According to his sensors, the human ships had been disguised as garbage transports. They had used Council security codes that shouldn't have existed, and they had destroyed a target that his computers said was impossible to attack. The second attack hit the communications relay at Junction. The human ships appeared from nowhere, disabled the relay with some kind of computer virus, and vanished again before reinforcements arrived. Suddenly, Council fleets across an entire sector couldn't communicate with each other. The third attack was even more impossible. Human forces somehow penetrated the maximum security prison at 442 and freed over 200 political prisoners from a dozen different species. The prison was designed to hold the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. It had never been breached in its 1,000-year history. The humans walked in through the front door using forged Council authority codes and simply told the guards to release the prisoners. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the humans and their rescued allies were long gone. Admiral requested an immediate strategy conference with the other Council fleet commanders. The meeting was held in virtual space, allowing commanders from across the galaxy to share information instantly. "They're not fighting like any species we've encountered," reported Admiral 9 of the collective fleet. "Our tactical analysis shows 37 different human battle groups, each using completely different strategies. Some attack supply lines, others target communications. A few seem focused entirely on rescuing captured beings." "The pattern makes no sense," agreed Commander Crystal Song of the forces. "They appear to have no central command structure, no coordinated strategy, no unified objectives." Admiral pulled up a galactic map showing Council fleet positions in red and known human attacks in blue. The blue dots were scattered randomly across the galaxy with no apparent pattern. "Perhaps that's exactly the point," he said slowly. "We've been trying to predict their strategy by assuming they have one. What if they don't?" The other commanders stared at the map, their ancient minds struggling to process the concept of warfare without central planning. "Impossible," declared Commander Crystal Song. "No species can coordinate military actions across thousands of light years without unified command. The logistics alone would be overwhelming." But Admiral was remembering something from his study of human history. Before humans had reached the stars, they had been hunters on a dangerous world. Pack hunters who could adapt their tactics in real time, changing strategies faster than their prey could respond. "What if each human group is acting independently?" he asked. "What if they're not following orders but just attacking whatever targets they think will cause the most damage?" The idea horrified the other commanders. Military doctrine across the galaxy was based on careful planning, precise coordination, and predictable tactics. The thought of warriors making up strategy as they went along was almost incomprehensible. But it would explain why the human attacks were so hard to predict. The fourth major attack proved Admiral's theory correct. A human fleet appeared in the heart of Council space, attacked the ancient fortress of Eternal Watch, and completely ignored standard military tactics in favor of something that looked like organized chaos. The fortress had defenses designed to stop traditional fleet attacks. Its shields could absorb the energy of a star. Its weapons could destroy anything within a light year, but the humans didn't attack the fortress directly. Instead, they used modified mining equipment to hurl asteroids at the fortress at significant fractions of light speed. The kinetic energy bypassed the shields entirely, turning the ancient structure into twisted metal and regret. "How did they even think of that?" demanded Commander Crystal Song during the emergency conference that followed. "Kinetic weapons haven't been used in warfare for 10,000 years. "Because they don't work against energy shields," Admiral 9 replied. "Every species knows that." "Every species except humans," Admiral said quietly. The pattern was becoming clear. The Council's military technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also predictable. For thousands of years, galactic warfare had followed the same rules: energy weapons against energy shields, massive fleets in careful formations, battles fought according to ancient traditions of honor and precision. Humans ignored all of those rules. They used kinetic weapons that were considered primitive. They attacked in small groups instead of massive fleets. They targeted supply lines instead of military bases. They rescued prisoners instead of conquering territory. Most disturbing of all, they adapted their tactics faster than Council computers could analyze them. The fifth attack was the one that made Admiral realize the Council was in real trouble. Admiral Sarah appeared in the Council capital system with a single human destroyer and a message for the High Council. She didn't attack anything. She didn't make demands. She just demonstrated that human ships could travel 40,000 light-years in 3 months and arrive anywhere in the galaxy without warning. The Council's best ships took 6 months to cover the same distance. Honored Council members, Admiral transmitted from her lone ship as it hung in space near the capital station. Humanity extends greetings and hopes for peaceful resolution to this conflict. We have no desire to continue this war, but we want you to understand something important. She paused while Council defense fleets scrambled to respond to her presence. You thought you were fighting a primitive species that would break under pressure. You were wrong. You're fighting 23 billion humans who have decided that freedom is worth any price. We can reach any system in the galaxy. We can adapt to any defense you create, and we will never stop. Her ship vanished before the Council's weapons could target it, leaving behind only a simple message: choose wisely. Admiral stared at the empty space where the human ship had been. In 6 weeks, humanity had demonstrated something that terrified the ancient Council more than any weapon could. They had proven that the galaxy's oldest and most powerful alliance could be challenged by a species that refused to follow the rules. But even more frightening was the realization that the humans weren't trying to conquer anyone. They just wanted to be left alone. And they had proven they were willing to tear apart the galactic order to achieve that goal. For the first time in his 3,000-year career, Admiral began to wonder if the Council had made a terrible mistake. The war ended not with a great battle, but with a simple question. It came 6 months after the conflict began, transmitted simultaneously to every Council fleet, every government, and every species in the galaxy. The message was brief and signed by, speaking for the newly formed Human Defense Alliance. How many more of your supply lines do we need to cut before you're ready to talk? Within 24 hours, Council fleets began withdrawing from human space. Stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. 200 species had sent representatives to what was being called the Galactic Peace Conference. It was the largest gathering of alien species in recorded history, and it was taking place in humanity's home system. The irony was not lost on anyone. Nervous, asked, joining her at the window. Smiled tiredly. Terrified. 6 months ago, I was just an ambassador trying to keep trade agreements running smoothly. Now I'm somehow responsible for rewriting the galactic political system. Through the window, she could see the massive Council ships floating alongside smaller vessels from species that had never been allowed to participate in galactic government. They who had warned about the military buildup had brought their entire diplomatic corps. The prisoners that humans had rescued were now representing their liberated worlds. Even some of the Council species had come, though their delegations were noticeably smaller than usual. The conference began 3 days later in Luna Station's newly expanded assembly hall. Had insisted that the meeting be held in neutral space, not on Earth or any human colony. This was about the entire galaxy, not just humanity. She opened the session standing at the same podium where human leaders had announced their rejection of the Council's ultimatum. But now the tone was different. Now they were here to build something new. 6 months ago, began, The High Council of 12 delivered an ultimatum that would have ended human independence. They did this because they feared what humanity might become if we continued to grow and develop freely. She looked around the hall at beings from across the galaxy. Some were familiar faces from her diplomatic career. Others were species she had never seen before, beings whose worlds had been too small or too poor to matter to the old council system. The council was right to fear us, continued, but not for the reasons they thought. They feared human expansion, human technology, human population growth. What they should have feared was the human idea that freedom belongs to everyone, not just the oldest and strongest species in the galaxy. A ripple of conversation went through the hall. The translator system struggled to convert concepts like individual rights and self-determination into languages that had never needed those words. For 50 years, humanity tried to earn acceptance through obedience. We followed council law, accepted junior status, and hoped that someday we would be considered worthy of equal treatment. We were wrong to hope for acceptance from beings who saw equality as a threat. Activated a holographic display showing the galaxy before and after the war. Before, council space was marked in blue, with small human colonies scattered around the edges like afterthoughts. After, the map showed something completely different. The war proved something important. It proved that the galaxy doesn't belong to the oldest species or the most advanced civilizations. It belongs to everyone who calls it home. She gestured to the assembled delegates. Every species here has the right to determine its own future. The right to grow, to explore, to develop technology, to expand their population as they see fit. These rights don't come from ancient councils or advanced civilizations. They exist because we exist. The delegate, a crystalline being smaller than the ones had faced in the judgment chamber, spoke with a voice like chiming bells. Human, your words sound appealing, but without central authority, how do you prevent chaos? How do you prevent species from expanding beyond their ability to support themselves? How do you prevent wars of conquest? Had expected this question. It was the same argument the council had been making for thousands of years. By making cooperation more profitable than conquest, she answered. The old system worked by giving all the benefits to the strongest species and forcing everyone else to compete for scraps. The new system will work by giving everyone incentives to work together. She activated another display, this one showing trade routes and resource flows across the galaxy. Humanity has something every species needs: food. Our agricultural technology can feed 1,000 worlds. Other species have technologies and resources we need. Instead of the council deciding who gets what, we let everyone negotiate directly. And if conflicts arise, asked the delegate, we settle them through arbitration, not ultimatums. We solve problems through negotiation, not military force. And if someone still chooses conquest over cooperation, paused, thinking of Admiral's lone destroyer appearing in council space. Well, humanity has proven that bullies can be stopped. The negotiations took 3 weeks. Every species wanted guarantees, exceptions, special consideration for their unique needs. The collective wanted assurance that their hive mind structure wouldn't be interfered with. The needed time flow adjustments for their geological thinking patterns. Dozens of smaller species wanted protection from their larger neighbors. Found herself mediating disputes between beings so alien that their basic concepts of existence were incompatible. But somehow, gradually, agreements began to emerge. The final document was called the Galactic Commonwealth Charter. It wasn't perfect, but it was something no one had thought possible 6 months earlier. A galactic government based on cooperation instead of domination. The key principles were simple. Every species had the right to self-determination. No one could tell another species how fast to reproduce, how to organize their government, or what technologies to develop. Disputes would be resolved through arbitration. with neutral species serving as mediators. Trade would be voluntary, with no species forced to share resources or technology they didn't want to share. Military force would be used only for defense, never for conquest or enforcement of political decisions. And most importantly, the Commonwealth would be governed by elected representatives from all member species, not by an ancient council of self-appointed rulers. The signing ceremony took place on Earth, in the same building where humanity had decided to reject the Council's ultimatum. Watched as beings from 200 worlds signed the charter that would reshape galactic civilization. Not everyone signed. 3 of the original Council species refused to join the Commonwealth, choosing instead to retreat to their core worlds with what remained of their ancient authority. But even some Council species, including and a faction of the Collective, chose to join as equal members rather than ruling masters. As the ceremony concluded, found herself standing alone on the observation deck, where she had first learned about the Council's military buildup. Earth's sun was setting through the dome, painting the sky in colors that reminded her of her artwork. Joined her again, as he had so many times during the past months. "Do you think it will work?" he asked. Considered the question. Probably not perfectly. There will be disputes, misunderstandings, probably a few small wars, but it will work better than the old system because it's based on choice instead of force. And humanity, what happens to us now? Smiled, thinking of human ships patrolling trade routes across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as protectors of any species that chose cooperation over domination. "We become what we always should have been," she said. "Not rulers, not subjects, just neighbors trying to make a better galaxy for our children." Through the dome, she could see ships from dozens of worlds preparing to return home with news of the Commonwealth Charter. Some carried the hope of species that had never before been allowed to participate in galactic government. Others carried the concern of civilizations that would have to earn cooperation instead of demanding obedience. But all of them carried the same message. The galaxy had changed, and there was no going back. Thought about her, who would grow up in a universe where humanity was no longer the species begging for acceptance. They would be citizens of a galaxy where every species had the right to reach for the stars on their own terms. The Council had gone too far when they forgot that peace without justice was just oppression wearing a pleasant mask. But in trying to destroy humanity's hope for freedom, they had accidentally given that hope to the entire galaxy. Smiled as she watched the stars appear in the darkening sky. Humanity hadn't abandoned peace after all. They had just helped the galaxy find a better version of it.